Hey, how do you feel about some high rarity cards, or maybe some foreign ones, or maybe be ahead of the game with others by preparing for future set releases with very quick shipping? Check out EJ Gaming and use code British5 on checkout for 5% off on all your orders. Link in the description.
Greetings, Lewis, and welcome to another video. So, there is one topic I kind of want to talk about. That topic has been looming in my mind for a couple of months, and it wasn't until Jesse Kotton's last video talking about like his issues with the format that kind of sparked a little bit more of that topic. And the topic that I'm talking about is engine requirements. Essentially, what does that mean? It means cards that you need to play in your main deck that makes your strategy viable or workable. But those are cards that you really just don't want to draw. Those are cards that you essentially just want to tutor out like throughout the game. One example of this is if you see like my Punk Tistina deck, you see here like the Discordance of the Tistina, and you see here like the Extreme Jam Session, and you see like the Dangerous Kabu. These are three actual examples of cards that you really just don't want to see in your hand. However, if you want to play the deck the most optimal way possible, you want to have these cards in your deck. Full Armor XYZ is another example of this card. Like the Punk Deer Note is another example. So essentially, if I play this deck and I see a lot of those cards and I don't see enough of my starters, essentially I'm just breaking and I'm not going to perform as optimal with my strategy. And there's a lot of decks that are pretty much like that. Like, let's take Steven Santoli's winning deck list from YCS Indianapolis. Like, you see the Rescue, the Alert, the Headquarters. You see the Contain, the Extinguish. You also see like the Turbulence and the Preventer. Like, those are essentially like 8 to 9 cards you just don't want to see in your opening hand. There's also the Sinful Spoil Snake Eye. You also don't want to see that in your opening hand. So pretty much like almost 25% of his deck are cards that you really just don't want to open with. And that's not that's a really big deal. Like, that's something that's a really big number. Essentially what it means that on every duel he has a really good high percent chance of seeing like a sum of these cards in his opening hand. The Fire Engine is another card you don't want to open with. The Dark Wish is is a cohesive argument. Like, you kind of do want to open the Dark Wish because she does start most of your plays. However, the Wanted poster is the actual card you want to open with. Let's take Purely, for example. And Purely is a really good example of this because Purely is arguably the most consistent deck in the format. Is the deck that has the most amount of starters. Is the deck that should be playing the deck and has his ball rolling more than any other deck. And is a deck that can play a good amount of non-engine. But essentially, there are some cards that you really don't want to see in this opening hand. For example, you have the Purely Street, you have the Purely Yeep, just to name like one or two cards. If you open all your non-engine and you don't open any of the memory cards or any of the Pureleys, then you're also struggling. But yeah, essentially that is like an issue that you will see with the Purely deck. And this is, again, the most consistent deck that we have in the room. We have Triff's Manidium list. Triff already brought up on his deck profile that he lost top 4 because he opened a bunch of the defensive cards and he did not open any starter. Instead, he opened double Meek. Like, Meek is a card that you do want to see in your hand. It is an extender. However, you don't want to see Meek by itself. You want to see Meek alongside any of these 11 cards before it. And yeah, like, essentially this is just like showcasing you like something that is very, very probable. The Exo Sister deck that made top 8, like, he plays Vadis, he plays the Returnia, he plays the Carpe Diem. Like those are cards that you have to play in your deck. Like if you don't play these cards in your deck, you are not winning with your strategy. You're not getting the most value out of your monster names and interruptions. However, there will be games where you just open all of them and you just don't open neither the spirits or Martha or Pax. So the question that we're going to bring up today is how many engine requirements are a good amount? There are a few factors that we have to take into consideration. One, can our deck play with just one card? Two, is our deck a 2-card combo deck? Three, how many copies of those non-card, like 2 cards that we need? 4, can we play enough of them to not overlap with just drawing too many of them? And that is a question that, there's not going to be a definitive answer. Like, essentially, every duelist is going to have, like, a very different perspective on this. Like, if we take, like, other decks, for example, let's take Vanquish Soul. Like, Vanquish Soul is a more complicated scenario. This is not a real deck list. This is like the test deck that I did for the Vanquish Soul video. However, I just wanted to talk about the few possible starters that we have. Let's say we got out like these 3 cards right here. And let's say we take out the Parallel Exceeds. So now let's count the engine requirements. You have the Snow Devil, you have the Continue, you have the Dust Devil, you have the Pluton, which is arguably an arguable statement because now you can just play this without this, thanks to like Jiaolong. But regardless, this is here. You have Panthera, which is a Vanquish Soul name, but it's not the name that you actually want to open with. You have the Caesar Valius, which is another one. And that's not counting like the non-engine. Like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So essentially we have 6 engine requirements. You can make the argument for Heavy Borgar and Jiaolong be more engine requirements that you don't want to see in your opening hand, because when it comes to Vanquish Soul, you kind of always want to open like a normal summon, and if you open too many of the tributes, that essentially just becomes a problem because you have to play like with minimal resources. So we have 6 engine requirements and 6 extenders that we need another card to work with. Is this deck actually consistent? Well, let's count the amount of starters. So you have the 3 Rosin, you have the 3 Stake Your Soul, you have Small World, which essentially can become either of these. You have Dr. Madlove, where it's not essentially like a real starter like Rosin. However, she is another name. You have Reinforcement of the Army, which is another copy of Rosin. So essentially, if you don't count Dr. Madlove, you have 10 actual starters in your deck. That is 25% of the main deck as a whole. And I don't know the exact numbers of opening one in your opening hand, but essentially it should be around or a little bit over 80%. So essentially, what does this mean? So you have more starters than you have as like your engine requirements, meaning that your win-loss ratio should be over 50% if you see enough games with your starters. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to like shuffle this hand like 5 different times and just see if we can open the Rosin or like any card that can start us the game. This hand is already a really good hand. So what we're going to do is we're going to put this token right here and we're going to put a number 1 on it. We're going to put this token over here, and this will be like our bad hands out of 10 resets. Now I just remembered that whenever we reset, the tokens disappear. So take this is already 1 on this side and 2 and 1 and 0 on this side. We open rosin, so that's 2 on this side. Hand number 3. We open Small World, which is essentially a card that can get us to rosin, so that's already 3. So we open Stake Your Soul, and we've opened Fenrir. Essentially, Stake Your Soul can get us there, but we need Fenrir to resolve. So this hand is pretty much like an in-between, like essentially between if it's playable or not. Because if your opponent hand traps or interrupts you, that essentially can also deter you from starting your plays, and that is an outside factor that you also have to consider. So essentially, this hand is still playable, but it's on the gray area. So we're going to say that out of our 4 testing hands, we've had 3.5 playable hands. Let's go with test number 5. We've opened Stake Your Soul and a Fire Monster, so that essentially is another starting play. So that is 5.5. Hand number 7. We've opened Rhoda again. And not only did we open Rhoda, we also open Jiaolong, and we open multiple Fire Monsters. So very optimal hand. 2 more. After this one opened Rosin. And let's see. 1 more after this one. We've opened Rosin again. And let's do 1 more. We've opened Rhoda. So it pretty much passed the test. This is like a very consistent deck at what it needs to do, at least like on the consistency department. Take note, don't take this visual example as a like heart felt this like way of just building the Vanquish deck. You can still very much brick with this deck eventually. Like, if this hand didn't have Rosin as the last card, it essentially would have been a brick hand. So I just gotta keep shuffling until we see like an actual brick hand, and just showcasing you like what I mean with the engine requirements. So far, it's not happening. We're still seeing like very essential draws. Now we drew into a non-opening, a non-well performance hand. And this is like one of the things that Jesse Kotton was looming into. Like, he was bringing up like essentially just having too many of these cards that you just don't want to see in your opening hand. And there are a lot of decks in the format that just have that simple issue. Like, if you play enough non-engine, you will see a lot of that non-engine in your starting hand. And like, you're just going to brick with it. A lot of people make the meme where saying like this deck like doesn't know if it actually wants to play or not. Essentially what they mean by that is like your only real actual starter is Robina or Map with another bird. And if you don't open any of those specifically, like, you're not winning this duel. However, you are playing 6 pot cards. And this spell, I forgot what it's called. I think it's Unexplored Winds. This one is essentially like another card that can just mulligan your hand and just make it so you can try starting out your plays. However, like, despite all the consistency cards you play in this deck can still brick. But yeah, I know this is like something very, very aware for a lot of people. I know that some people that like already are playing competitively have already had this mindset, but I kind of wanted to make this discussion video because it's something that not many people think about when it comes to deck building. And outright, sometimes you just can end up not doing the right decision, and it can just cost you like the game and outcost and cost you like the entire tournament. Like, I'm going to take one of my Rescue Ace decks. This is one of the old ones before like Age of Overlord. Let's say here's another one. Like, this is a 45 card like list with the like super heavy samurai cards, and this was just like one experiment I did in the past. If you go to my channel and you look at past videos, you will see that I actually experimented with Rescue Ace enough times. And essentially, I just gave up on the deck because I just kept breaking with it a little more than I kind of wanted to. And that does not take Rescue Ace's performance by any means. Like, we already know that Rescue Ace right now is like one of the most contending decks of the format. YCS Richmond is this weekend, and I think we're going to see this deck actually perform well at that event. But it does not take away from like my actual discomfort with playing with this strategy, meaning that I wasn't not going to play this deck moving forward, despite the new support actually aiding with its consistency more than not. But yeah, that's pretty much it from this discussion video. I hope you found this video informative. I hope you found this video to your liking, understanding. Yeah, more videos coming soon. Keep practicing and keep dueling.